Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are a very well respected member of their local craft beer scene. They've been on the scene for a couple of years, but it seems that they do a wide variety of different styles, and for me, as someone who's just a beer enthusiast, I think that is always a good sign when they're willing to try different things. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their annual releases. It's quite highly anticipated from what I understand, and the style itself is one that I very much enjoy, and I don't think I've had too many Australian brewed examples of this style. So needless to say, I'm really curious to see what this one's going to have in store for us, because I've heard that it's very good. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Perth in Western Australia, where for a lot of people, me included, is where Australian craft beer really kicked off with Little Creatures and things like that. Correct me on the comment section below if you do feel I'm wrong about that. But we're going to go to the West Leederville area of the city, which is just to the east of the very centre from what I understand. And that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer from Nowhereman Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Mr. Otter's Barleywine. It comes in at 12.2% ABV, and this one is a barley wine. And I'm guessing, from the fact that it's called Mr. Otter as a tribute to Maris Otter malt, it's going to be more of an English style barley wine, this one. But yeah, as you know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a huge fan of the kind of big brown sugary type beers. That includes, you know, Scotch ales, doppelbocks, Belgian quadruples, barley wines. So yeah, this is one that just kind of caught my eye. But I actually found this beer in Out of the Brew over in Central on Hong Kong Island, and they always get a fairly good stream of Australian stuff, so I'll probably be buying quite a lot of Australian beers from them over the next little while. But yeah, this just caught my eye, an Australian barley wine. I haven't reviewed too many of them, so why not? If you are interested in Australian craft beers, do make sure you check out my friend Sam Smalley, who has the channel Short and Stout Beer Reviews. I'll put the link to his channel in the video description below, so make sure you show him some love. Lovely guy, big fan of the European beer tubing scene for quite a long time, and he is just kind of starting to get his own channel off the ground, which is great to see. So yeah, go and show him some love and learn a little bit more about Australian beer, and hopefully I can go down there and meet him at some point. That would be pretty damn awesome. But yeah, let's crack on with this beer then and see how we get on. A 12.2% barley wine from Nowhereman Brewing Company in West Leederville, Perth, Western Australia. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future from Nowhereman Brewing Company. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging systems. Just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Australian playlist along with a number of other things, and that is being added to whenever I get the opportunity. Quite a steady flow of Australian beers here in Hong Kong, which is great to see, but do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very, very interesting things on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Nowhereman Brewing Company then. So, as I've mentioned to you already, Nowhereman Brewing Company are based in West Leederville, which is close to the centre of Perth over in Western Australia, and the company was founded back in 2016 by Rhys Whedon, who had been involved in the local beer scene for a number of years, and he came from a background in conservation and event management, and he'd actually been involved in organising the WA Beer Week for 6 years until 2015, so 2009 up until 2015. But apparently he started considering founding his own brewery back in 2011 or 2012, but he was still working full time, and so it took him a few years to find a premises and actually get the project off the ground. But the name of the brewery, Nowhereman, comes from the Beatles track of the same name, and a lot of the guys involved in the foundation of this brewery were big fans of the band, so calling it Nowhereman just kind of made sense. But Rees founded the brewery as a 160-seat brew pub, and this opened to the public in 2017. They serve pizza there, charcuterie and various other beer-friendly dishes from what I understand. But in the early days, Rees hired Paul Wyman, who came in as the head brewer. He previously worked for the Monk in Fremantle and also Colonial Brewing in Margaret River. He also brought in Matt Shield to help run the venue. He previously worked as a manager for Little Creatures, and then there was Matthew Sartori, who was in charge of the kitchen. And another key member of the team who has been there for a number of years is Pia Ponton, who is the director of operations, or was, and we'll come to that in a little second. But the brewery also take pride in stating that they're located on Whadjuk Budja, which is a reference to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, who are the Aboriginals that lived in the area, the geographical area of Perth, for tens of thousands of years. And it's quite nice to see that actually, that Australian breweries kind of refer to their local the local Aboriginal tribes, because you know the Aboriginals lived in Australia undisturbed for ages, absolutely ages, and their heritage is quite interesting when you read into it, so I do recommend you do that. But a little bit later on in 2018, Eddie Still came in as the new head brewer, and under his guidance they built up a very strong reputation for themselves, and their beers went on to win a number of accolades. But in 2023 it was announced that Otherside and Nowhereman would merge under the banner of 1113, which is a company that owns various venues around Perth, including some music venues, and this has really helped grow the distribution of the beer quite significantly over the last little while. But from what I understand, the Nowhereman Brewing Company's brew pub is still operating. I think there's some Otherside beer getting sold in there as well, obviously, and they are brewing a number of their beers at the Otherside facility as well. I think the Otherside facility is a little bit more of a kind of industrial type brewery, whereas the Nowhereman Brewing operation was always as a brew pub. So yeah, if this merger hadn't happened, I would very much doubt that I would find this beer here in Hong Kong, of course. So yeah, that's the thing. So yeah, Nowhereman and Otherside Brewing are associated these days, and you will see a review of an Otherside beer at some point in the next couple of weeks, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I forget which one it is that I actually bought. But yeah, as of April 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 40 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. That might be 400 actually, I'm wondering if I've written the wrong number down, but yeah, they've produced quite a lot of different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. But yeah, Nowhereman, as I said, a very well respected member of the Perth beer scene, and Perth, of course, for a lot of people is one of the places where craft beer really kind of kicked off in Australia. Little Creatures are considered by many to be, you know, the most well-known Australian craft brewery, but you know, I don't know if you can really consider them craft anymore. Stone and Wood are the other one. But yeah, Perth, a very, very good craft beer city, and somewhere that I do hope to visit in the future. I never got to go there when I was in Australia back in 2014 and 2015. But yeah, that is everything, as I say, that I can tell you about Nowhereman Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open up. You can see the can is sweating there because I had to turn the aircon off before we filmed the review, but you can see a really nicely presented artwork on this one. Plain sort of gold shiny top on the can there. This beer is, I think it's 375 millilitres, I'm not 100% sure about that, but yeah, really nicely presented can, this one. It says on the side here, we acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land we brew on, and this is brewed and canned by Nowhereman Brewing Company, 25 Harrogate Street, West Leederville, Australia. But it also has a little blurb on the back here as well. So it says, made in Australia, behind Nowhereman are a bunch of people who believe in doing good things and making great beer. Brewed annually since 2020, Mr. Otter is a proper ping-pong English-style barley wine with boasting rich, complex malts that make it a delight to drink now, soon, later, or even much later. No matter when you drink it, we hope that you enjoy this can of tasty goodness brewed with love from us to you. So yeah, this is interesting. As I say, this beer was first brewed back in 2020. This is the 2023 edition, so edition number 4, I guess we could say. But yeah, apparently I read on one of the articles that the reason they decided to do this barley wine was because in 2020 the pandemic kicked off. They had, you know, they weren't sure exactly what to do with their tanks, so they thought, well, let's use up the grains and do a long fermentation barley wine, and they released it and people really liked it, and so they've done it every year since then. So quite an interesting story, but it apparently uses 100%, the malt base is 100% Maris Otter malt from England, which is quite impressive. So yeah, like I said, 12.2% barley wine, this one, English style barley wine, as they've confirmed on the little blurb of the beer. Let's just get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. I think this must only be the second, maybe third barley wine at most that I've had brewed by an Australian brewery. So that's something on the channel that we do need to change if I get the opportunity. So you could feel the can was pretty damn solid actually when I opened this up. But yeah, let's give this a pour and see what we get. We'll just be a bit careful with it, of course, though, because it was pretty damn solid. So yeah, anyway, before the head disappears, you can see that this beer poured with about 1.5 fingers, maybe even 2 fingers of a frothy, I would say very light fawn coloured head. It's quite bumpy. I'll let you guys have a little look at that before it does disappear. You can see the head on this beer is pretty bumpy and kind of soapy and things, but it's not, that head isn't going to stick around too long. You can just see it fading away quite quickly. That's just going to leave a very, very thin foamy layer on the top of the beer, if anything. But yeah, it looks pretty nice. Medium-sized bubbles there, some big bumpier ones. But yeah, that's fading away to be pretty much nothing. So yeah, it looks pretty good. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this beer, this is a lovely sort of deep blood orange colour, which you can get from barley wines, of course. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few different things. 1, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrelation that you do or any adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too. And with barley wines, yeah, the barrel aging side of things can play a role sometimes. The length of the wort boil can also play a role. These are the 2 key ways to kind of play around with your barley wine a little bit. Is you know, you can do double mash, you can also do a little bit of aging, or you can do a longer wort boil. Just going from the colour of this one, I don't think it's had a madly long wort boil, because if it had, it would be a little bit more of a kind of mahogany, stained mahogany, sort of chestnutty type colour. It's actually one of the brighter barley wines that I've come across, but the English barley wines in my experience tend to be a bit brighter in colour than the American ones. The main difference between an English and American barley wine for me would be that the English ones tend to have a little bit more kind of dryness and toastiness in their malt base, and the fruits tend to be a little bit more along the lines of like dates, pears, sultanas and stuff like that, whereas in the American ones the sweetness is a lot more rounded and straight up, you know, sweet caramel, treacle sort of thing, and the fruits are a bit more like, you know, raisins, plums, things like that. So yeah, there's a key difference, I would say, in the flavour profile of these beers. But in terms of what you'd expect appearance wise from an English barley wine, this one is pretty much spot on. That lighter kind of deep blood orange amber colour. There's not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. A few bubbles kind of creeping their way up toward the surface, but that is to be expected. But all in all, pretty much as you would expect appearance wise from this style of beer. I think it's about time we have a little look at the aroma then. So let's start off our aroma section of this video. Oh yeah, pretty old school that. You can smell that kind of distinctive brown bready, white bready, biscuity thing of the Maris Otter right away. But I'm going to say straight away, it's a lovely smelling beer. As I've said before on the channel though, I'm a big sucker for these kind of big, sweet, brown sugary beers, and you know, this one's no exception to that. Yeah, this beer gives you everything you'd want of a barley wine, but it is very distinctively English barley wine rather than American. But from what I gather, this is pretty popular. A lot of people look forward to this beer's release. Yeah, so it gives you everything you'd want. You've got some nice breadiness in there, you've got some dry fruits, a lot of sweetness as well. Yeah, let's just break the aroma of this beer down then and describe it for you that little bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer for me is like a fresh white bread hedgehog roll bread crust. It's very much like that, like fresh bread just produced straight out of the bakery. There is a little touch, there is a wee tiny touch of like woodiness to this one, maybe a little bit of cracker, but of course that takes a back seat to the sheer breadiness that comes out of this beer. And the Maris Otter as a malt variety is very, very distinctive. Like I'm getting a lot of it's kind of dry but also quite like doughy actually. Like there's a sort of, there's this big, thick, doughy, wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of this beer, and it's absolutely lovely. You can smell that being one of the kind of key ingredients of the backbone in this particular beer, and it's just you know, it is just absolutely lovely. I really, really like how this all pieces together actually. But on my nose, like I'm getting quite a little bit of white bread as well, which I think is really, really nice. I'm also getting quite a wee bit of I would say, woodiness out of this one. The more that I smell of this beer, the more woodiness that that I get on this one. It's quite it really is quite interesting, I have to say. But yeah, the brown sugary side of this beer is also very, very interesting. I mean, I would say that above, you know, you've got the brown bread in there, the white bready character as well. I think it's really, really nice. It's awesome. It really is interesting how this goes together. Yeah, but a lot of like sweet brown bread, white bread, and then a little bit of nuttiness and woodiness and things too. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business on the malty side of things is very typical of what you might expect of Maris Otter malt. And yeah, everything that you'd expect from that. So yeah, if you've tried some old English traditional beers, I think this is something that you probably are going to enjoy, in fact. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the kind of bready side of the beer. But above the bread, of course, you're starting to get a little bit more of the you're starting to get a wee bit more of the kind of brown sugary side of things as well. So you can smell with this beer, one of the ways you can play with barley wines is you can do a slightly longer wort boil, and that means that you know, that means that it's going to give you more of these kind of chewy, leathery sort of characters in the brown sugary base. That you can't really detect too much of that in the aroma. You get a little bit of it, but not overly much. For me, with this beer, I'm getting a little bit, the can's sweating a little bit on the table there. You can see that just moving around. But yeah, I would say on the brown sugary side of things, there's a little bit of toasty brown sugar underneath. You certainly get quite a lot of sweet caramel out of this one. I'm getting a lot of kind of fudgy characteristics as well, which are very, very interesting. But then at the same time, I'm also getting a bit of like a straight up sweet caramel coming out of this beer. The more that I smell of it too. So yeah, sweet caramel, Werther's Original Butter Candy Butterscotch, a little bit of toasty note to it, a little bit of an almost leathery character as well. So yeah, it is really, really quite interesting, this one. Now, when it comes to the hoppy side of this beer, barley wines are, of course, the big brothers of the original double IPAs or imperial IPAs, whatever you want to call them. So they are actually quite a hop-forward style of beer. So that's definitely worth keeping in mind with these. But this beer, you don't get too much of a pungent green component out of it. And if we're talking about the context of English style barley wines, then the hop to use in these would be Bramling's Cross. It's a very popular hop to use with English style barley wines. But for me, if you do a barley wine ale like this, an English style barley wine, they are going to have a little bit of hop character, and when you smell this one, it does actually have a little bit of that. You get a wee bit of that earthiness, you get a little bit of that distinctive herbal character as well, which comes from English hops, be it Kent Goldings, Bramling's Cross, whatever. So I'm getting a little bit of herbal character, a little bit of earthiness for sure. There's a nice wee touch of floral aromaticity to this one, not too much. English hops are not known for being overly floral, but you've also got a little bit of grassiness coming out of this beer too, which I think is very, very nice. So for me, the fruitiness that comes out of this beer and the green component are typically English. It really is quite interesting in that particular regard. So yeah, the green component, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of English hop in this. It could be just Kent Goldings or something like that, but like I say, Bramling's Cross is the one that is distinctively known for barley wines in England. The fruity characters are kind of what you'd expect. There's a little bit of datey character in there. There's a lot of like sultana, you know, dry white green grapes. So yeah, pear, sultana, a little bit of apricot as well. And there is maybe just a little hint of a kind of red fruity, kind of curranty character out of this one, like a wee bit of like black currant or red currant or something like that. These are all things, as I say, that you would expect of the English barley wine as a style. So yeah, the way this beer goes together is very, very nice, and it is pretty much what you would expect of an English style barley wine in terms of like aroma profile. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Mr. Otters barley wine, a 12.2% English style barley wine from Nowhereman Brewing Company in Perth in Western Australia. So let's get stuck into this one and see what it's all about. Slàinte, skål, cheers, there we go. Oh yeah, that's really, really damn nice actually. Yeah, proper old school English barley wine. It gives you everything you'd want from this style actually. You know, a lot of people obviously prefer the American barley wines because, you know, people's flavour palettes these days want to go for bigger, bolder flavours and so on. The English barley wine is a style that's become a little bit, you know, pushed to the side if you like. But they can be very, very nice. But I think this one it's really well done actually. I quite like that when a brewery looks at a historic style and tries to promote it a little bit more. But they've done a really good job with this. When I think about the English style barley wines that I've had from some of the older craft breweries like Rooster and things in Yorkshire, this one goes pretty close to what those guys were producing or have been producing. So thumbs up to Nowhereman with this. They're giving a pretty damn authentic flavour profile to this beer, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, gives you everything you'd want. You've got a bit of the graininess, which you'd expect from an English beer, big breadiness, good little bit of sweetness to it. There is a little bit of hoppy character in there, which you would expect from the barley wine style as well, distinctively English hop profile as well. Then you've got all the kind of fruitiness coming out of this beer. So yeah, I think we can break this beer down there and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. We'll start on the middle third of the palate though, as we always do. So let's do that. So yeah, for me, the middle third of your palate in this beer is where a lot of the complexity of this one comes out, and it's where it's sweetest as well. So the backbone of the beer, you have this lovely, very smooth, kind of smooth, like brown bready bread crust forming the backbone of the beer. It's like a fresh, wholemeal, brown bready, like square loaf type thing. That's what I'm getting out of this one. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate though, you get little hints of like woodiness and stuff like that coming out of the beer too. So that little bit of woodiness that comes out of this beer, I think is very, very nice. You do get above that kind of bread crusty layer, you do get a little bit of an almost crackery character as well, and the kind of dryness of the beer becomes a little bit more apparent the further into the aftertaste that you go to. So I like that about this one for sure. But then above all of that, you start to get the actual bready side of the beer. So you can feel the next layer up is this really dense, and actually it's kind of interesting, it's actually quite a sweet layer of brown bready character, and that's one of the distinctive things about Maris Otter malt, is that it's always quite sweet in the impact flavour, but then it dries out and shows you more of the kind of grainy side of the flavour the further into the aftertaste you go. So yeah, you've got the bread crusty note, the cracker, the sweet, you know, the kind of wholemeal brown bready note in there, which is quite sweet and oily, and then above that you've got this really nice kind of wheaty, like white bready character that sits above that as well. Obviously this beer doesn't have wheat in it, but the character of the white bread that sits above the brown bread for me is it just shows you that almost densifying feature that you find in IPAs, hazy IPAs especially. It just has that slightly densifying character to it. So yeah, bread crust, cracker, brown bread, white bread. That's what I'm really getting out of this one. And the dryness that it shows you is one of the distinctive characteristics of Maris Otter for sure. So the next layer up, because this middle third of your palate is very, very layered, the next layer up is most definitely the start of the brown sugars. So the first layer of the brown sugary character is a little bit toasty. You do get a little bit of that toasty brown sugary character out of this one. Not too toasty though, it does give you a little bit of dryness in fairness into the aftertaste. But above that you start to get the McVitie's digestive biscuity character coming out of the beer. So yeah, it's toasty brown sugar, biscuit, and then you get that circle in the middle of your palate where all the booziness and stuff like that comes out of the beer. So in the dead centre of the middle of your palate, you get that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing coming out of the beer. So yeah, Werther's Original, well no, I'd say maybe a very slightly more kind of treacle molasses sort of thing. There is a little bit of that treacly note in the dead centre of your palate. That's the concentration of the booze. As you move further out from that, you start to get a wee bit more of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. And as you move further afield from that, you get the brighter straight up caramel, but you can feel a little bit of the almost kind of spicy bite, if you like, from the alcohol in this one at 12%. You know, it's 12.2% ABV, and that is one of the things. I think, you know, Maris Otter, when I think about it, it's not the sweetest of malt varieties you're going to come across. You do usually need, if you want to cover the booziness of the beer completely, you usually need a little bit of a straight up like caramel or something like that. So yeah, you can feel a little bit of the boozy bite in the middle of your palate with this beer, but you want that, you know, when you have a 12.2% barley wine, you want to know that it's 12.2% ABV. So yeah, that's to be expected. But yeah, treacle, as you move further out, a bit more kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch, sweeter caramel, then the biscuit, and then that's kind of on top of the toasty brown sugars. And I think at that we've covered everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate, where, like I said, is the point where most of the complexity lies. Let's go to the back third of the palate then. And as I've said, the back third of your palate is going to show you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. But do remember, the front third of the front of your palate is where most of the sweeter flavours are going to come out, and as you go back, more dry and bitter flavours will come out. But yeah, border region between middle and back third of your palate then. A little bit of brown bread in the base there, the white bread sits on top, but in the back of that, in the back third of your palate, you can feel the bread crust is there. It's a little bit drier, of course, for sure. Above that, you've got the cracker, which again is a little bit drier. Then you've got a layer of, you know, lighter, kind of more taller and airy brown bread as well. It still has a wee degree of sweetness to it, but still quite dry, as you'd expect of Maris Otter malt. Above that, you get the white bread, and then above that layer, again, that white bread is a little bit taller and more airy, and then above that, you get the more some of the more toasty aspects of the caramel and brown sugar just creeping over the top. And then above everything else, you have the yeasty side of the beer. So let's focus on that yeasty character just to finish off the malty part of this beer review. So for me, the yeasty side of this beer, in the dead centre of that, it's like a very concentrated and slightly drier brown bready character that comes out of the beer. So that concentrated, dry, brown bready character in there. As you move out from that, it's got a bit more of a kind of rusticy, woody, crusty white bread, and then the very edge of the yeasty character is more like a kind of straight, like, it's almost like a grainy rye bread crust, which I think is quite interesting. But like I say, all of that sits on top of everything else on the back third of the palate, and certainly you can feel the flavour of the back third of your palate. The flavour is definitely taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way all of that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's go to the hoppy side of things. This beer, of course, at the time of drinking will be, doesn't actually have a canned on date on it, but I'm guessing It's probably about a year old at the time of drinking. So, you know, a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one. You could keep it for even longer and that would drop out even more. But I'm still getting a good little bit of the hoppiness out of this. And I say I'd be quite curious to know what hops they're using in this one. But anyway, in the back corners of the palate, you've got a good little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's got a little bit more of a herbal character. And as you push further forward along the kind of the sides of your palate, you do get a wee bit of that kind of danker, piney, resiny note out of this one. There's a little bit of a more spicy floral aromaticity there on the front corners of your palate, and then round the front curve of the tongue, it's got a little bit of a lighter, grassy sort of thing. From the aroma, I would have guessed this was only like Bramling's Cross or something, but from the actual flavour, I think there's a bit of American hop in here as well, if not Australian. You know, the Australians have these high alpha acid hops too, and a number of varieties that I probably haven't heard of as well. So yeah, there is a more New World hop in this one as well. I don't think it's only English hops that are in this. The sort of spicy floral notes and things that you get out of this beer do seem a bit New World as opposed to being a more Old World English thing. So yeah, it could be a little bit like Williamette from America or something like that, or one of the New Zealand hops maybe. I can't think of an Australian hop that has, other than Enigma, which has a red fruity type character to it, but Enigma's a little bit more kind of Nelson Sauvin like. It has this gooseberry, red curranty sort of thing, and I don't think that's what's in here, to be honest with you, going from the fruitiness. But yeah, I think there is a bit of there could be a little bit, it could just be a bit of Cascade or a bit of Chinook or something like that, but it definitely, the hoppy character feels a little bit American or New Worldy, however you want to describe it. But yeah, let's focus on that front third of your palate then and the fruity side of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of that bready build up in there, brown bread in the base, the white bread on top, then the base of that front third of your palate, the fresh white bready bread crust again, a little bit of the cracker, brown bread, white bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at that. Yeah, so the fruity side of the beer, as I've said, is kind of what you'd expect. I really like it, actually. It's a lot, you know, if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, it's a lot of like oily date, a lot of sultana, yeah, dates, sultanas. As you move further forward, it's a little bit more of a kind of oily peary type character that comes out of this one. So yeah, dates, sultanas, oily pear. Yeah, I really like that about it. There's maybe a very slight hint of like a grassy, kind of slightly limey, lemony, citrusy note behind the front tip of the tongue, and maybe a very slight hint of like fig or something. There's a very light sort of fig or red curranty character to this beer, but for me, mostly the fruity notes coming out of this one are, yeah, dates, pears, sultanas, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that covers it quite well, in all honesty. Yeah, I don't know if we really need to say anything else about the flavour of this beer, so I think we can round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, this is a pretty full-bodied beer. It's kind of in the mid-range of full-bodied. I don't find it overly like thick and sticky and stuff like that, but it gives you what you would like of the style. So yeah, big, thick, kind of sticky character to it, but not overwhelming. Mid-range, full-bodied, carbonation is quite smooth. The beer still feels quite clean actually, which is quite interesting. It does have a little bit of a, you can feel the cleanliness of the water in this as well. In terms of IBUs, I think this beer does have at least, you know, 60, 70 IBUs, something like that, because it does give you a little bit of a residual bitterness. You do get a little bit of that lingering into the aftertaste. But the malt base, wee bit of dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, and an oily but still dry sweetness on top. And then you've got a lovely oily, fruity character coming out of it as well, which I think is really quite nice. So yeah, the fruity characters for me are very, very dry, and, you know, as I say, pears, you know, even a bit of apricot, I never mentioned that earlier, a bit of apricot, pear, sultanas, dates, these kind of things coming out of this one. But all in all, a very impressive English style barley wine. I've only reviewed a couple of barley wines from Australia before, but this one has certainly impressed me, and it makes me quite curious about the other beers that Nowhereman produce as well. So yeah, I need to go down to Perth and do some out and about filming down there, because I know there's a lot of breweries and I could get some very interesting videos down there. And for me, it's great to go and try these beers at source, of course. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. I think this has been a really interesting beer to try. This was the Mr. Otter's barley wine, a 12.2% English style barley wine from Nowhereman Brewing Company in Perth in Western Australia. I've been very impressed with this, very true to style and a very nicely done beer, and definitely cool to cover another Australian brewery for you here on Rampant Lion Reviews as well. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nowhereman Brewing Company as well, and we will return to these guys whenever the opportunity arises. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys later. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.